Welcome to what is said to be yet another insightful panel as part of BloombergQuint's focused coverage on MSME Day 2021. MSMEs are at the heart of the Indian economy, and if MSMEs thrive, India thrives with greater employment, higher rates of GDP growth, and of course, higher per capita income. My name is Ivor Sones, and I'm editor special features at BloombergQuint. In this panel, we will explore the intersection of digital technologies and MSME issues, and this is especially in the context of digital becoming more important than ever before in the light of this pandemic. So, in this important virtual roundtable for MSME Day 2021, we will focus on how digital can power MSMEs in this post-pandemic scenario. To help us in this conversation at the intersection of digital and Indian SME issues, we have an eminent panel here today. First up, we have Mr. Anil Bhardwaj, who is the Secretary General of the Federation of Indian Micro and Small and Medium Enterprises, FISME, who is one of India's most reputed and respected authorities on the MSME sector. Next up, we have Mr. Prateek Garg, who is the founder, CEO, and Managing Director of Progressive Infotech, and has helped many Indian organizations leverage digital and technology better, and also sits on some CIA bodies and helps Indian industry, guide Indian industry when it comes to technology. And finally, last but not the least, we have Mr. Hariharan Muralimanohar, who is head of marketing for Zoho One at Zoho Corporation, and he comes from a very interesting scientific background. While most marketers come from a management background, Hari comes from a science background. So I really look forward to a very interesting and insightful panel discussion today. Even as I begin, my first question is to you, Mr. Bhardwaj. As somebody who leads the MSME Industry Association, who lobbies with government, etc., the fact is that MSMEs have really never had it easy, right? From infrastructure skills to finance, right? So I want to ask you, one, has the pandemic really made things much worse, or is it just another problem that MSMEs had to face amongst a litany of other issues? And secondly, 16 months into the pandemic, which is the one issue that MSMEs have struggled with the most? We realize there are credit issues, issues of market access, ability to keep business going because of stop and start economy, and of course the lack of technology, the ability to spend on technology like large companies. So what's your take on this?
First of all, thank you for this opportunity to be with you and listen to other panelists also. Well, if we look at the first pandemic and the second pandemic, there is some very fundamental difference. So in the first pandemic, we were not really knowing, what is going to happen. So there was a fear, natural fear of unknown. But in this particular case, because of a large amount of human losses, some kind of a panic has stricken the MSME sector, as perhaps everybody else. Secondly, in the first pandemic, it was a complete lockdown for 70 plus days. So all economic activity came to a grinding halt. This time, right from the beginning, the political leadership said that there would not be complete lockdowns, but there would be specific areas for micro containment zones, so to say. So the economic activity went on, barring a few sectors, quite particularly the retail and some other services sector. But the manufacturing activity went on from 30% to almost 100%, depending upon the sector. Like pharmaceutical they were working around the clock. Packaged food industry was also working round the clock. Packaging industry was working round the clock. But government suppliers may be at 50%. And then people who have been largely dependent upon retail as their retail outlet, so they were working at 20%, 30% of the capacities. So, but the major difference has been because of the huge losses of humans all around, and their relatives dying, entrepreneurs themselves not surviving, partnerships dissolving because one partner has died. So this time the impact has been qualitatively very different. It has really subdued the sentiments. After the first lockdown, suddenly people were out and they said, the worst is behind us, and they started investing. They were there was kind of a euphoria. This time around, although the situation is economically better, but the chips are really down. The sentiments are down. People are even asking these questions. Even if, in spite of all the wealth, we could not save our nears and dears. So this is a very different kind of a situation. So last time people were MSMEs were vying for money, and there was a 3 lakh crore rupees fund that was created by the government to infuse liquidity and provide short-term loans. This time there were hardly any takers. People not were even demanding money. So because of the sentiments. One question that you asked is that one problem that bothered MSMEs most this time. Well, besides the problem of finance and the SMA, special mention account, that is NPA classification or bank-related issue, the major issue this time that troubled MSMEs was a huge increase in the cost of raw material. And it was partly a global phenomenon, maybe around 25%, but largely an Indian phenomenon, because iron, steel, copper, aluminium, plastic raw material, all these were manufactured by very, very large industries. And they took advantage of the current situation and increased their prices by ranging from 35% to 60%. And the MSMEs who had orders in their hand, they could not meet commitments, or if they met the commitments, it was very difficult to stay solvent.
Thank you so much for that insight. Mr. Garg, I'd like to ask you the same question. Now, you at Progressive, you all obviously help MSMEs, and you all get a great ringside view into some of their concerns.
Every disaster or brings in opportunity as well. So I'm of the view that when COVID stuck, the digital acceleration happened at a breakneck speed. We saw a lot of the SMB getting operative. There were customers who didn't even have proper communication and collaboration tools. They didn't have they had on-premise maybe an accounting software running off their desktops. So we saw cloud coming in extremely handy in this period, and the global cloud hyperscale providers like AWS, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. So all of them saw a tremendous amount of adoption coming in, and people learned to run their businesses and transact. And in this period, a lot of the retailers who were very large, there was a very large impact on that side. They found ways to go digital and set up e-commerce platforms, and quickly get their products and services available to their segment of customers, and you could today buy and sell through that. So I think it's been a mixed bag. Yes, there are since I'm on the North Region Council for CII, so I get visibility of far larger cross section of the industry. All right, so there have been challenges. In this wave, there have been challenges on labor, because the labor went back to their hometowns again, fearing a very similar impact on their lives. So industries were struggling, though the industry was not closed down in this period in wave 2, right? But the larger impact has really come in the micro segment, the sub 5 crore, as the definition of the MSME ministry is, where smaller retailers and smaller traders, they found it difficult in this period, and it continues to be painful.
Absolutely, sir. And we will certainly come into, I think, each of these issues. And there's certainly a lot to talk about, the challenges, etc. But what I also want to start is, now that we've said some context to how it was, I also want to start it out, with some good news, right? Because often we only look at the negative of what has really gone wrong, etc. So, Hari, my question to you is, since this is a panel on digital, can you share some examples of MSMEs that have really beaten pandemic-driven disruption by leveraging digital really well? Whether it's in market access, managing productivity, etc.
So thank you for, first of all, including me in this panel. It's already quite interesting, and this whole small business topic is something that is even I've always been intrigued about, given that we are all from India and we see how small businesses, even from the smallest shops to the small retail shops, the way they run and the way they take business as a family affair and are so close to it. So in terms of the positivities, so one thing that I have noticed, I think the first we discussed about how has it always been difficult for the MSMEs, or has this pandemic actually caused that to amplify? In that regard, what I have found is a lot of smaller businesses do have this curiosity or interest to get digital, but amidst all their businesses and the way they are trying to make ends meet, they just have this skepticism always about if I were to set up a business online, how much do I have to spend? How much time will it take for me to take something online? And is it worth me spending this time here? So there was always this skepticism. And for them to take that leap in even trying to go digital, there was always the hesitation. And they were like, let's just run the business the way we know. So this was how sort of the mentality was. But what this pandemic has done, though it has been a really bad thing to happen for all of us, it has made these kind of companies now finally take that. It has acted as a trigger to hop on to the digital bandwagon and try to run things digitally. And now that that trigger has happened and they can see value from this trigger, and it is not as difficult as we thought it would be to set up something online. And it can be done, like my friend Mr. Prateek said, in 2 days, he helped so many businesses to hop on to remote working. It's actually not that difficult. It's just in the mind of a lot of small businesses that it's going to cost me a lot of money. It's going to take me a lot of time. So let me just push this aside for now. But now that you have to somehow manage your business and you have to continue your business with your shop shut down, the only way that it can be done is online. And there is no other choice, but now you're pushed to take that leap to see how you can do things online. And now they see the value in going online and how it is easy. Even after this pandemic ends, I think a lot of small businesses are now going to keep it as one of their other points that we need to still have a digital presence. And an interesting anecdote I can think of at this juncture is in my locality. So I live in a suburb, and Zoho's office itself is in sort of a suburb, 35 kilometers away from the main city of Chennai. That is how our CEO likes it. He doesn't like to be in cities. He likes to be away from the cities because he feels that that is where the growth should be, in rural areas. In fact, we even have a rural revival program that is ongoing in Zoho. So just before the pandemic struck, at least the second wave struck, there was this restaurant that was started, and he started it, and within 3 days it was locked down. So, and I also know that person as a friend because he's connected to a Zoho employee, and he's a friend of the Zoho employee, and we were talking about, so now what to do? This lockdown comes, and I just opened my restaurant, and now looks like I just am going to be at a loss. But at that point, now that this guy had a Zoho friend, he said, you don't have to worry. And I think, in fact, you might right now have more traction of people ordering stuff from you online because people cannot go outside to eat. And this might actually be a silver lining for you. And they had started this pizza joint. And if you won't believe that, even if suppose there wasn't a lockdown, that they wouldn't have become that popular. They are the only pizza place here right now in this locality, which is why they opened it. And because it was locked down, nobody was able to go outside, and they set up a simple menu online, a simple website with their menu. They had WhatsApp business account, and from the get-go, their pizza business has been running online, and he gets about 100 orders every day. From the time this business itself started in the lockdown. And because it was the lockdown, people had no choice but to actually order online. And it turned out that the only way they are functioning now is online, and he's looking forward to opening his actual restaurant when it does open up, so that people now can go there and eat. So and this is one, and there are also these grocery stores that are close by. There is a more supermarket. They now have initiated a WhatsApp chatbot. The moment the government order came that the shops can function online, you cannot have people come to your shops. The next day there was a WhatsApp bot. Here is a WhatsApp bot. Here is a link. You click on this link and place your order, and we'll deliver it to your home. And it is like it just took 2 days for all of these businesses to adopt to something digital. And the good thing is maybe all of them had somebody to give them that help. How do you? So this restaurant had this Zoho friend who told them, "Don't worry, so you can do this digitally." Maybe more supermarket had somebody. So that I think what we need to do is the hand-holding help these businesses need in terms of taking that leap online. We need to set up more people or training teams to help them out without it being too much of a cost. So the thing is, they feel that if I have to take software, it is again a high cost. ERP, they think ERP. You don't really have to go to the ERP league. You can actually set up your business with some really cost-effective software. And we have in Zoho run some programs where we offer our Zoho One, which is a bundle of all our software apps, free for 6 months, free for 1 year, by tying up with, say, TANSTIA, which is Tamil Nadu Tiny and Small Industries Association. And but the thing is that we give the software, but always it comes back to, I have all of this. Now, how do I use this? So how are you going to train me on this? We need that help more than anything else. So that is where I think the gap is, and that is the gap, I think, together as tech companies and the government, we need to figure out ways of coming up with programs to handhold these businesses to get on the digital bandwagon.
Thank you, Hari. I think there were some excellent examples that you brought out. And certainly, I think in areas like retail, also as Mr. Garg pointed out, certainly companies have made the shift fairly quickly, right? Everybody from small grocers, for instance, like bookstores, kids are now kids are learning online, right? So how do bookstores really deliver books? Everybody is tied up in our locality with Dunzo, right? You just order on Dunzo, everything comes hyper local. And I guess some of that has also helped, right? Because there has been so much of common infrastructure that has been set up in this delivery and hyper local logistics scene, etc. But Mr. Garg, I wanted to ask you, what about other sectors like manufacturing, etc.? And in some of those areas, the challenges have been lack of skills, also paucity of infrastructure, and of course, there's the big challenge of financing, which is always there. Have any of that been overcome by digital in the recent past, especially during the pandemic?
As I said earlier, the impact on, as far as financial constraints are concerned, was seen more on the micro segment. Okay, but as you move away from that into the small to medium segment, at least one didn't see too much of an impact. And the government's emergency credit line, which again Mr. Bhardwaj was alluding to, did help people to get that emergency credit line guaranteed by the government to fund in that interim period of complete lockdown. Okay. But the bigger challenge there was more to do with, in the manufacturing particularly, was the labor. that is where the challenge lies. But the manufacturing companies also adopted digital fairly rapidly, and they also used digital platforms, to access markets and get their products out there. Okay, so they learned, to get the retailer mental makeup and pick that up. I mean, a contrarian view that I have is that think of a world if this pandemic had hit us and we didn't have cloud platforms, and low-code platforms like Zoho, and I'm particularly repeating Zoho, since Hari is here and he can correct me if I say something wrong. And many other platforms, like that, the Microsoft O365 or the, Google Suite or whatever workplaces. So I think, and that is where these e-commerce, stores were already established. A very large pizza company in the country was already, pre-COVID, was already doing 40% of their order booking online. And the moment lockdown happened, and after the lockdown, since the stores were not allowed to open, this number went right up to 80%. And by end of the year, when they reported their numbers, they had nearly done the same revenue as the previous year. Okay, which kind of tells you the power of digital, and how it brings the consumer and the producer together in that sense. Exporters were already on it, but this in our industry, we kind of laugh at that. The pandemic actually accelerated digital adoption by about 5 years. So where we are today, we would have been hence 5 years hence from today. Because the human race finds ways to survive, and I think digital was the survival lifeline in that sense.
Because so many CIOs have also told me that, right, how this pandemic, all the digital transformation that they planned, etc., right, 3, 4, 5 years, suddenly, in a matter of a month, you had to just get it all done, right? I mean, whether you were manufacturing, whatever you were. I mean, earlier you thought collaboration wasn't for me. I mean, I don't need something like Team or Zoom because I'm a manufacturing outfit. Why do I need it? And suddenly everybody needed it, and so on and so forth, right? I mean, as again Hari pointed out about how retailers took to digital, how restaurants took. Earlier it was about how much do I need to pay to the software vendor, maybe to the payment gateway, etc. Right? You looked at all those things. Now it's like it's mandatory, and of course it's become so smooth also. Mr. Bhardwaj, I wanted to come back to you in terms of this entire government scenario, right? How important is this, and what have you seen in terms of support from the government? We certainly know there have been many schemes, etc. Initially, of course, there was also the credit schemes, I think, in the wave 1, but I think wave 2 there has not been so much demand. But what has been the impact, and how much is the government helped to really get MSMEs, to ensure that this pandemic does not really hurt them too badly? And what more does the government need to do to ensure that MSMEs get back on the road to recovery, to growth, and also to leverage digital to kind of, to survive, to innovate out of this disruption?
In the first pandemic itself, I mean, during the first pandemic itself, the government came out with a very large package, and this ECLGS, emergency credit line of 3 lakh crore rupees, was indeed a very bold step, and very intelligent step also, because ultimately government spent only 4,000 crores in creating that guarantee, and that led to disbursement to the tune of 2.5 lakh crore rupees already, and more than 90 lakh borrowers could find assistance because of this scheme. So it was needed, it was something well used. More may be required, and government had been taking those steps. Government indeed came in for public procurement also for ensuring timely payment through public sector undertakings, etc. So it has tried what was in its hand, but at the same time there were many issues. I find it that in a democracy, many of these issues are difficult to address. Like, for example, one of the biggest problems that in the second pandemic MSMEs faced was the huge rise in the commodity prices. And that ranged between 25% to 65% within a span of, say, 3 months. So you would agree that, no business, particularly small business, can really be solvent, can remain solvent, when you have taken orders at X prices and suddenly the raw material prices after a month they go to plus 60%. And especially if there are government supplies or there are supplies to large companies and there are no price escalation clause built in the agreement, which is the case most of the time. So suddenly they found that it's very difficult to remain solvent. And in India, the problem is exacerbated because we still do not have a workable, efficient insolvency and bankruptcy regime for the MSME sector. So we have for the large scale sector, large corporate. First of all, 90% of MSMEs are proprietorship and partnership firms, and there are no law at this moment for addressing the personal insolvencies. So far, what we have is for the corporate insolvency. And even if they are private limited companies, because of the personal guarantees of the promoters, they are treated more or less like individual insolvency, and so it becomes complicated. So sum and substance is that if you are in trouble, it's very difficult to get out. Then you are stuck. So these are the problems. Now, some good things have happened, and particularly in the space of digital, as I absolutely agree with Prateek ji that the adoption has increased to at a phenomenal speed. And it is surprising that a large number of MSMEs who have been dithering and finding different reasons for not adopting digital suddenly became the advocates of digital to their fellow beings. So this is an interesting part. But there is a flip side to it. This sudden adoption has exposed their vulnerabilities also, because their systems were not geared up, the learning curve has been reduced considerably, and they rely on third party for their operations, like chartered accountants for filing GST, consultants for filing labor and other income tax returns, etc., etc. So this has exposed their systems to external security issues, which they are not prepared, are not can say fully aware of those issues. And I think there are challenges both in terms of funds that will be required to upgrade their systems. There are HR issues there. People might not be competent enough to work on those systems. And thirdly, and very importantly, interoperability of different systems that they have, So one computer is at 486, the other is Pentium 4, still working there. And then there's a Apple laptop that the promoter is using, and then mobile phones, and so on and so forth. So all these issues, I think, need to be addressed as we go along.
This security issues clearly that Mr. Bhardwaj pointed out are, recently I think the US government said that ransomware is perhaps as big an issue as, almost like how important the Cold War was, right? I think that was the comparison made. And that's how, dangerous it's become. Now, in a country like India, and especially with MSMEs, as Mr. Bhardwaj so rightly pointed out, with them having issues of dealing with multiple vendors, not having the best people on board because they obviously can't afford CIOs, etc., often having to deal with partners. Security is even more of a concern for them. So how do MSMEs really, with their cost-sensitive approach, really deal with the security challenges, improve their security posture, and can the government do something for them? Because the government certainly has a lot of initiatives like CERTIN, etc. What more can the government do in this regard?
I think this is very clearly and correctly amplified by Mr. Bhardwaj that there are issues, and nevertheless. So if there are some existing dated technology or applications the MSME is using, and suddenly you bring in a modern cloud platform, and you're trying to integrate, not everything integrates in that sense. Okay, so so therefore that is where Hari was also mentioning earlier that there is an adoption challenge. How do we get people who have opted for these platforms? How do they become more proficient? How do you learn quickly and get to do and get optimal outcomes from here? I think the digital also done a lot of other good. Learning management systems around all this are very, very robust now, and you don't really need a classroom training. You can. These are self-paced video programs which are available. There's so much information available. It's just that you need to have both the aptitude, the intent, and the passion, to learn. And today, there is nothing that you can't learn. Okay, now, and this is more of an HR issue than I would think a technical issue, because there are solutions to all of it. Security, yes, is a big red flag in the world that we live in, and government has recently announced a cybersecurity helpline, and all of that. We've had in the last 16 months, I would have been through at least 4 ransomware attacks from I'm not really an MSME, but a mid-cap company, a 3,000 crore company to a 100 crore company, or 50, 60 crore company. That kind of breadth, where ransomware attack, just because they never felt the need of a security assessment and put the right firewalls around the whole architecture, and so. But that is how you learn, and that's how you then wake up and put things together. But this is not going away, and I think there is this pandemic warfare that we think, some of us believe is happening in the world, and I think there is going to be a cybersecurity warfare, which is already happening in bits and pieces. So I don't know about the social media warfare, but these two issues are very certainly and not easily regulatable. So yes, digital brings with it, but if you are on cloud platforms, then they come with inherent built-in security. So you don't. You can't really be hacked unless you really let out your passwords. The data can't really be hacked. You won't hear that Zoho has been hacked or a Microsoft cloud has been hacked. All right. So none of our customers on cloud got hacked in this period, and that's the good news.
Yeah, that's I think very good news. And maybe Hari, while you deal with the security question, I'd also like you to maybe Hari speak a little bit about how you've seen cloud and SaaS technology really explode among MSMEs, and how have you all ensured security?
Yeah. So security and beyond security, even privacy. So they go hand in hand, right? So privacy and security, if you talk about security, you need to talk about privacy of the user's data and vice versa. So in Zoho, we treat privacy and security as a whole. We don't see security alone or privacy alone, because now if you see with the advent of all these privacy laws that are happening, starting with GDPR in European region, where the European region, it stipulates that any company that is doing service to a consumer needs to have or follow these GDPR laws to protect our users' identity and personal information. And you cannot simply go firing guns and doing marketing with their information and sharing it with others. So, the first point is, when you talk about security, privacy also is related to it. And when it comes to WhatsApp, with all the recent controversy surrounding WhatsApp's change in privacy policy and the way they said in business accounts, Facebook has the right to look into the business interactions that happen between that business and his clients, and then Facebook doing marketing based on those conversations. So that was a whole controversy that recently happened with WhatsApp and even Twitter and others, and it's still ongoing. So in that sense, in Zoho, we take this very, very seriously. So when GDPR came in, and since Zoho is a company that services to global clients, we did not apply GDPR only for the European region. We said, while we are at it, let's apply this principle of privacy and security across for all of our customers, India and everywhere. And even I think Indian government is still working on a data privacy law that is going to be stipulated by India. So so what I would suggest the MSMEs, when they, like Mr. Bhardwaj pointed out, yes, they are now suddenly excited about all these free tools that are available for them to use. And whenever something is free, people have to be take a step back and see why it is free. They have to look into some details on the privacy policy, that whole long document that usually pops up. It's better to actually read some of the text in that when they sign up for a service, because you don't want to use a tool that is going to rightfully take your information and say, I will market based on this information. So in Zoho, we ensure that we never use the data of our users to share it with others for their marketing. We are not in the advertising business at all. In fact, whatever we provide for free in Zoho, we don't show ads in those tools. It is simply just our product given for free with limited features. That's all. So that is very airtight in our privacy policy, that when you choose Zoho, you choose privacy and your data is protected. And for MSMEs, the good thing is we have to educate them that while you are adopting digital technologies, be choosy about what you are going to use to run your business. Be choosy about a cloud software that has all of these security features in place. So that needs to be there in their mind consciously, that when I use a tool, I have to ensure that tool is not going to use my data. And it is called adjunct surveillance, actually. This whole thing is called adjunct surveillance, in the sense you think that something is being given for free to you, but actually you are turning into the product, because they are giving the product for free into you. And then you put all your information there, and that information, you are now becoming the product for advertising. So you don't want that to happen. So you choose tools that have airtight security and all privacy measures, and which has clearly states in its privacy document that your data and your information is not going to be provided to third parties for running advertisement. And in fact, it is even worth to pay a little bit for software that costs a little bit, not too expensive, but you pay a little bit for software that ensures the security. And also go for bundled software. So the whole concept of Zoho One. So we have this bundle called Zoho One, which is a suite of all the software we have. And these softwares talk to each other and are already integrated. So this solves that problem of when I use different things, it's now difficult for me to make them talk to each other. So it is better to go for bundles offered by good brands. It can be Zoho, it can be Microsoft, but it is better to go for a bundle which gives you a bunch of tools that will already integrate and talk to each other. And most of the prominent brands do have APIs that you can use some low-code mechanisms to integrate with, like WhatsApp and other things. So in fact, one interesting example is a lot of Indian businesses, they look for, a lot of people are on WhatsApp. But WhatsApp, with all the news that is going out, I somehow don't feel comfortable using WhatsApp. What do I do? But people are only in WhatsApp. So what should we do for this? If they are all in WhatsApp, we have to deal with WhatsApp. So what we usually suggest is, you have your WhatsApp business account, you have your WhatsApp bot, but once they start interacting with you, take them to a private business channel, where that is where you're going to carry out all your actual interaction, and not on WhatsApp. You catch them on WhatsApp, and you move them to a tool that is more secure, and it will respect your information. So in that regard, we have something called Zoho Click, which is equivalent to WhatsApp, but it is meant for work. So you can have somebody on WhatsApp and direct them to a Zoho Click channel, and there you deal with all of your business interactions, so that it is moved to a more secure area and not WhatsApp.
I think that is, of course, that whenever something is free, you are the data. Your data is the payment that you're making. You are the product. You are the data. Mr. Bhardwaj, I wanted to, as we come to the end of this discussion, I have just a couple more questions, and one of them was really on, the lack of critical connect between Indian MSMEs and their global counterparts. Now, this has often been seen as a challenge for the sector lagging behind competitors. For instance, Chinese MSMEs offer, enjoy far greater linkages with global firms, especially through data linkages, etc., giving them seamless access to global value chain. Do you think that during this pandemic there's been any movement towards making these linkages to global firms and global value chains any faster, any better in India?
At the strategic level, this has been a positive fallout of the pandemic. That global value chains are in transformation, and all major global value chains that are being driven from the West, they are searching for another, at least one more supply chain base than China. Some are considering Vietnam as a obvious choice, from Thailand. India remains on the radar, but I think we'll have to make a lot of efforts to really be their choice as a partner country. And that would require a right kind of industrial policy, our ability to reduce tariff on commodities. To give an example, simple like Gillette, which is a US company and has huge number of manufacturing bases in China. Now, this has just two products, apart from technology and brand, it is just plastic and steel, specialized steel. The technology has become ubiquitous. I mean, almost maybe around 1,000 small companies might be there, or maybe more actually, that are producing use and throw kind of razors. But Gillette is a huge producer. But if Gillette decides to relocate its manufacturing facility in India, it will have to shut its shop within a day. Why? The plastic raw material will attract import duty, which is 30% higher than what it is in China. The steel will attract 45% more duties and cost than what they would do in China. So try to understand, I mean, if you are trying to produce a product which is cheapest and use and throw, you just can't produce it in India in a scale at a cost which is required to be globally competitive and remain a market leader. So we'll have to work quite a lot. But good thing is, it has given us a window. And that window has come almost after 30 years. I think after 1990, this is a new window that is there. After collapse of USSR, this is the window that we have. Because in West, there is a huge churn. If you look at what has come out as a communique from the G7 countries, it tells you that they are opening up a window. And that means we have to make use of this advantage. Coming out with our last industrial policy was decided in 1991. Good time that we do it now. It is maybe coinciding with the right kind of opportunities, global opportunities that are opening. And similarly, the question that you asked is why Indian SMEs are not really connected with the global value chains or their larger counterparts. Because the size is so very small. It is not even small, it is micro. So we are talking about 6 crore small enterprises. What is the average employment? Can you guess? It is less than 2. Less than 2. And how many industries across the sector, large, big, small, have more than 10 employees? Just around 2 lakh. These many industries would be there in one mohalla of Guangzhou. Just forget about China. So, I mean, we have to really build scale up. And they have not been able to, and medium enterprises, how many medium enterprises would have in India? Around 10,000 in manufacturing. So, for every thing, whether it's a medium enterprises or whether it's small enterprises, the size in comparison to the global counterpart is really micro. You can't really have what kind of investment they would make in a company of turnover of 5 crore rupees, having invested to 50 lakh rupees. How much money that foreign guy would bring and then would have a return on the equity? If you convert it into dollars, it would be few $1,000. They wouldn't take us seriously. So I think we have to create conditions and policies whereby micro and small grow up to medium-sized enterprises. We have created such bias. I'll give you just 2 examples to make it short. That if you're a small and if you become medium, suddenly you are deprived of your access to market from the public procurement. As a small-scale industry, 25% central government procurement is for micro and small enterprises, mandatory. But the moment you cross that limit and you become medium, suddenly that door is closed to you. Similarly, not only that, if your payments are delayed as a small scale industry, you can approach facilitation councils for delayed payment. And you are given, there is a setup which can ensure and help you to get your payment in time. As a medium enterprises, you can't even have access to that.
As we come to the end of this discussion, I just have one final question for all of you, and maybe I'd like you to start with this, Hari. Now that we can see light at the end of the tunnel, what are some of the key elements on this recovery roadmap for MSME do you see from a digital perspective? What more do MSME owners and managements need to do? And also, I'd also like you to look at this automation perspective, which is also becoming very big in some sectors, right? Many of them are looking at automation. How do they really look at this? I wanted to really get a sense of, what are the things that really MSME business owners need to do or to get on this recovery roadmap. What do they need to do, especially from a digital perspective? And Hari, for you, I wanted to ask you, what do they need to do on the automation front? Because that is again something that is many MSMEs are looking to do. And maybe the same question I'd like, Mr. Garg to answer again from his perspective, from his wisdom in terms of what MSMEs need to do, what government needs to do. And finally, Mr. Bhardwaj, I'd like him to close with the same of what are his recommendations for MSMEs and for the government.
Yeah. So number one is, first, there needs to be a belief that needs to be developed that it is worth to consider me to take my to also have a digital front for my business. So that skepticism was there with all of these small businesses, that given, like Mr. Bhardwaj said, given the micro scale, given that I'm so micro, is this even required for me to consider something like digital? Given that I'm such a micro business, is it going to be of any use to me? So that kind of a skepticism, I think that's now broken. In fact, this pandemic situation has even made people think about going digital. So first of all, the management in a company needs to believe that we have to do something about digital transformation and digitizing the parts of our business that is possible to be digitized. I mean, of course, there is going to be IT sector and the consultants and all of them. They are not making any physical product. So it's more or less like a consultation business where it's more about interaction and working remotely. But on the other hand, when you have these medium industries that are making products, you can't completely do everything remote, right? You still need people. There needs to be a workforce that shows up, and they have to do that work to make that product. But there are certain aspects of even that business in terms of the front-facing office or the back office in terms of managing inventory and all that can be digitized. So they will have to believe that we need to digitize all these things so that next time some situation comes up where we need to shut shop, there is business continuity that can still happen because we already have ourselves digitally covered in any way that is possible. So that is one. So that mindset needs to be fixed, that let's do something about taking whatever is possible to digitize, let's do that. There are two parts to automation, but in terms of automating the business workflow itself, there are again a lot of things in place in cloud software where, let's say, 2 or 3 people involved in 3 different departments have to interact with each other for a process to happen in terms of a file coming in, and it has to be signed by someone else, and it has to be reviewed by someone else and then passed on to another desk. So this process can be automated in terms of an automation system. So for example, if you have a CRM system used by your salespeople, and a lot of people don't know about CRM at all. If you put a CRM system in place, a lot of sales processes that usually happen manually can be automated because of the software workflow. Once you set it up in the software, it will take care of that process being fulfilled. So this automation, and also if you, we might ourselves have encountered a lot of these WhatsApp bots that businesses are using now. So I recently purchased a router UPS because there's a lot of power cuts, and it's a small device. And it's done by a smaller company that makes this device, set up in Bangalore. So the moment the device comes in, I'm thinking about if I have any doubt about how should I set this up, should this wire go there and all. What these guys have done is they have a scanner QR code that comes with the product. You scan it, it immediately opens up a chatbot. And the chatbot actually takes care of all the basic answers. And only when it goes to some advanced technical help and it's not able to answer, it says, let me bring a manual person to help you further. So some of those steps that are that can be handled with basic interaction can be automated by means of a chatbot. So these kind of places where automation is possible to be handled by the system or software, that can be automated so that lessens the burden on having to have manual labor take care of all that.
So, Mr. Garg, final thoughts from you in terms of what MSMEs need to do to get, especially on the digital front, to get back on this road to recovery, etc. What are your thoughts? What are your suggestions from your experience?
Well, someone who started 25 years, 30 years ago as an entrepreneur with 1 lakh rupee capital, from a micro to small to medium size company that I grew, I think a lot has changed in the country. But I'm a firm believer that, a country of our size with a very large aspirational youth, spawning MSME and nurturing MSME is the only solution to provide employment and gainful employment, because neither the government nor the large industry segment or large companies will not be able to create so much of jobs. So the only way is to nurture this. And so one of the things which intrigued me always, and again I'm rewording what Mr. Bhardwaj said, I think we need to encourage people to fail fast, which really means that there has to be a simpler law to allow people declare bankruptcy and move on and restart their lives. Failing in our generation, failing was a very bad word in which we grew. We were always scared of not taking risks just because we may just fail. Fortunately, we're not seeing that in the next generation. But this is something. The second, of course, like the Startup India program, there has to be a similar story that needs to get developed here, and an enabling environment, which could also package, shall I call it a set of digital platforms that is provided to these SMEs to use and set up their businesses. The good news is that some of the smarter companies in the MSME sector use this pandemic period to optimize their businesses, to automate and create much more efficiencies. And I know a whole lot of them who have actually improved on their profitability in the last year, using this as an opportunity by and improving customer experience. All right, so a lot, but there is not one recipe across all the industry sectors. In India, and the MSME has a very large number of unorganized sector. And I think the need there is very different, to the organized sector. So whether it is manufacturing, again in manufacturing there are different segments, and then services is a very, very large part of the MSME. All right, so their needs are very different. All right, as far as adoption of digital, I think is a given now. Without having a digital workplace environment, it will be very difficult to run and manage a business. And every company has relooked at its real estate. All right, so everybody is optimizing their footprint and really looking at a better way of working. You don't have to get everybody done. Need not travel to office every day. So I think so much more opportunity coming in that direction as well.
So that's a great way of looking at it, sir. Very, very positive way. Mr. Bhardwaj, final words from you in terms of what MSME owners, MSME managements need to do to really get on this road to recovery, especially from a digital perspective, and also what does the government need to do? Quickly, if you could tell us this.
I think your second question, that what government can do. I think in digital adoption, the role of the government is of paramount importance, especially in the context of MSMEs. What government has to do, because there is nobody else who can do that, is trust in the market. And trust can be created and needs to be created and has been created in other countries through right set of legislations. For example, I think Hariharan said that security and privacy issues are bundled together. No, they are different. They are very, very different. They have been treated differently. Now, security is a tech issue, but privacy is a policy issue. And for policy issues, you have to have laws, proper legislation. In India also, it has been in the making. It needs to be, it has already adopted in some, with some features, but I think more comprehensive law is needed. Similarly, we also have to see that, consumer laws which can give me trust. For example, if I'm using a platform, cloud-based platform, like Mr. Hariharan's company, and tomorrow I'm interested in moving my data to another company, and if he refuses to give me the data, what happens? So the portability of the data, of the systems, and then that means if there are 5 system integrators, integrated systems are available, there has to be interoperability among them, concordance among them. That would not come automatically. You can't leave that to the market. You have to have laws for that. And that means we need to have a set of legislation to allow this to happen in a more systemic manner and in a manner that would create trust. And I think, although, we have been sensitized to the power of digital, but to use it effectively, government's role has become of paramount importance.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. I think we've had a fascinating discussion. We've really run out of time, and that's one of the reasons is because we've had so much to discuss. We've really, I think, captured so well why digital is so critical today. Why it's a no-brainer. There is no choice. Every MSME organization needs to leverage digital. We've seen some great examples of how they've leveraged digital. We've seen some good work in that the government has done. We've seen the challenges also, the flip side, because they're so small. We've seen the challenges of security, how to overcome them, the rise of cloud, the benefits that brings. And finally, I think Mr. Bhardwaj really very eloquently put it all together. There really needs to be that policy framework which only the government can do in terms of privacy, in terms of so many other issues, even bankruptcy, etc., all of which could really make MSMEs really the growth engine of India once again. So thank you so much for joining us today on this BloombergQuint virtual panel. Thank you for your time, your inputs, and it was really great having you here.